Hey, everybody, welcome to the Tech Founder Show, where we talk to people who are on the bleeding edge of technology, doing amazing things, changing the way we work, the way we live, the work we play, and more. So, with that, Andy, how are you doing today?
Today is a great Tuesday. Another fantastic show lined up. So I'm excited. How are you?
I'm good. I'm trying to figure out something. I was wondering if you've ever taught your computer how to taste wine, because I need a little help with that.
No, I haven't. So I'm curious. Can that even happen?
Well, you know what? According to today's guest, it can. So we have the right person to answer today's challenge that I have. Katarina Axelsson, she's the CEO and founder of Tastery, and it's the world's first AI-driven sensory sciences company. And I will let her come on and tell us what that means. Hey, Katarina, welcome.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. We're super excited. So I saw on your website, I thought it was pretty cool. It says that, Tastery is an innovative startup that is teaching computers how to taste wine. So tell us about Tastery, tell us about the concept, and super excited to hear all about it.
Sure. I think I should start just by telling you the origin story and how this came about. And that would make the most sense as to why we had to teach a computer how to taste. So I went to Cal Poly University, which is in the central coast of California. It's an engineering school. And I paid my way through college by working as a quality control chemist in the wine industry because, well, we have 400 or so wineries in a 20-mile radius here. And you could say I was given a lot of freedom to run my own mad scientist type experiments in the lab in my free time. And I took full advantage of that. And I had come up with several inventions in the lab early on, even before Tastery. So I invented a contraption, for example, that used 35% less sulfur and made a better quality wine and things like that. And Tastery was one of those inventions. And it came out of an observation I made about how idiosyncratic, you could say, the product development process is, not just in the wine industry, but that is where it started. So one example is we had a $500,000, 100,000 gallon batch of wine. So nothing romantic about it. And we sold half of that batch under one label and the other half of that batch under another wine label. So the same product went out into market with different labels, different pricing, different marketing. And the critics scored one of those wines much higher than the other. And consequently, one of those products did really well and the other one didn't. So there's very much this fog of intuition, I think, for manufacturers and retailers and distributors on how products are going to be perceived in the market by consumers, and how do you predict that? And that just led me down this journey for the next year and a half, where I ended up talking to the head researchers of, let's just say, major companies and flavor and fragrance companies, and trying to understand how are they mitigating the risk of launching a product that's not going to work out in the market. And it's a big problem, actually, because the current failure rate is about 85%. So I found that what they're doing is and it's not really working. It's not really improving the odds. They're looking at the chemistry of products and they're trying to identify the presence or absence of specific compounds. So, for example, does benzaldehyde equal cherry in a red wine? And they just keep doing that over and over again. But the problem is there's a flavor matrix effect happening. So there's hundreds of other compounds in this chemical soup at various concentrations and ratios. And it's either masking or allowing the compound you're looking for to be expressed. So it's not very predictive. And there was no known method to look at all the chemistry in the correct ratios the same way the human palate would. And then the second problem is we all have unique biology. So even when you work with expert tasters, 3 of them could say something tastes like apple. 3 of them will say it tastes like pear, and there's no ground truth. And then the third problem is where we really come in, which is we found that even if you can predict what something is going to taste or smell like, it has very little impact on whether or not you actually like the product. And at the end of the day, that's what really matters, right? It's not, can I, taste cherry or, I don't know, chocolate in my coffee? It's, do I like it? So my methodology that I spent 1.5 years developing was designed to break down the flavor matrix the same way the human palate would. And it was very robust data. So I was looking at the chemistry down to like the molecular count of each compound. So after gathering this data, I realized it would take me like 1.5 years to process like one component of the data set, and like thousands of years to process all of it. So I set up a meeting with the head of the master's program in mathematics and computer science at the university. And I just said, like, help me understand this. And he said, I'll talk to you for 30 minutes. But after looking at the data, it turned into an all-day meeting. And he canceled his class and brought other PhDs into the room. And long story short, Professor Dektiar and I partnered up. And what he did over the years was develop AI and machine learning algorithms specifically designed to connect my flavor matrix data to consumer palates. So we combined our 2 inventions and filed for a patent, and were awarded that patent for all sensory-based products. And that's why we say we taught a computer how to taste.
That's pretty amazing. Awesome story.
Yeah, I mean, almost like kind of just flabbergasted at the story. One piece that I'm curious, because you brush through it quickly, is real timeline. So, how long did it really take to go from like, oh, I've got this data to a real product?
Almost 3 years. It wasn't a business. The technology definitely came before the business, and it was just a research project with flavor chemists and sensory scientists and PhDs. And yeah, we weren't thinking about the business aspect of it for a long time. I think I incorporated the company in 2016 just to get a loan on my own analytical chemistry equipment. But we didn't go into market until early 2019.
I'm kind of curious about that too, when you were originally thinking of this, was it to create a business and to do this, or was it purely scientific and you were interested in the topic? I'm just wondering how early the intent was.
Yeah, so I have always been interested in business and starting a business or joining and running a business. But I didn't go into this wanting to start a business for the sake of starting a business. So it was quite academic in the beginning, and it just happened to be that the invention we discovered or stumbled upon had some amazing business applications. So we just kind of took it and ran with it, if that kind of makes sense. So I guess right person at the right time had a role in that. Yeah.
And I think that's the point I'm kind of getting to a little bit is, it's interesting for folks that come up with a great technology that sometimes they're not intending to reinvent an industry or anything like that. It's just, the charisma that happens to do that.
That's right.
I'm also, interested in, it's complex. So what you're doing is really complex. How do you go about that process of really breaking this down into something that's consumable? And I guess over a 3-year period, it's steps, but how do you take something that to me as not familiar with the industry seems very daunting?
Yeah.
And how do you even attack that and start going after it?
I think the amount of time it took played a role in that. I think anytime you develop any new method to look at the chemical properties of something, it takes a long time. It could take over 1 year to develop a new methodology for anyone. I just happened to do it operating under assumptions that maybe weren't so traditional. Let's just say I took some creative liberties. And I would say that took even more time. I think things really started to accelerate when I brought the PhDs in, and they started to help me understand how to efficiently process this data. I mean, as I mentioned, just to understand the chemistry that was coming out of my method would have taken thousands of years. So getting someone in who understands data science, how to process data sets, I think was really, really critical to moving that process along. Figuring out the business model as well, and you can imagine there are a lot of applications and use cases for this technology, figuring out which ones to go after and which ones are going to provide the most impact also took time. I think we're still in the process of figuring all of that out while focusing on our current objectives.
Yeah, I was going to ask that, is how applicable it is to other, foods and areas. So what is the breadth of this technology? Is it just moving to other liquids? Is it to solid foods? Is it way beyond that, of something that I'm not even thinking about?
Sure. Yeah. So great question. So we've evaluated and proven efficacy for all alcoholic beverages, aqueous solutions. So I guess beverages of any kind. We've done fragrance. I guess coffee's included in that, and hot sauce. We're still researching like more solid type food products, but and if there's any flavoring and like a CPG product, we can contribute to that. Whether or not the texture plays an important role, we still have to figure that out. But from a business perspective, just the alcoholic beverage market and the amount of waste and going on here, it's a big enough opportunity to keep us busy for quite some time. Our technology applies to anything you can taste or smell. So I would say every couple of months we're evaluating what other verticals or products this applies to, and so far we haven't failed at any efficacy tests. So seems to be pretty broad.
So Katarina, to this point, who is the target audience that you guys have gone after? Where has that been focused?
Yeah, so I'll try to answer this in steps, because it did happen in steps. So when we had this technology, the first thing we realized is we have this challenge and advantage, right? So the advantage is we have this super high quality, robust proprietary data set, and that's really important in AI nowadays. And the challenge is we can't buy this data. We can't scrape it. We have to go out in the market and generate it ourselves. So the first product that we ever launched was a API and interface-based personalized wine recommender engine. And it was to first evaluate the efficacy of the product in the market, but also to gather consumer palate data in the market to get insight and validate the technology. So what we did was we used a different form of algorithm, and we built it on top of our chemistry and palate data set that we had been training in-house from that point. And we created you can say, deceptively whimsical looking quiz. It takes about 20 seconds. It has 10 questions, and we ask customers things like, how do you like black coffee or a licorice or dark chocolate? And it's dynamic, and it's based on the inventory you're looking at. So once you answer these 10 questions, we found we can understand about 85% of your palate the first time around. And in return, you get wine recommendations for any products you're shopping for in the store. So, and I could totally dive into exactly how that works, but the business benefit was obviously, we're mitigating the cold start problem typical of most recommender systems, right? We didn't want to wait until, we were in Netflix or Amazon, where we had millions and millions of users and could collaboratively filter them. So that's what the quiz did, is it got us data now. And we started with grocery retail. And immediately we were seeing really positive results. So there was already a use case for retailers, because we were increasing wine sales. We were organically increasing their margin, and customers were scoring the products on average 45% higher. So that really validated the use case for, selling more wine and connecting consumers to products they love. It definitely evolved from there. Today, we're vertically integrated business, and we work with distributors and manufacturers, but we needed that data first.
I would love to hear, and I'm sure it's very complex and a lot goes into it, but just a high level about that quiz and how you guys arrived with something so effective and so short.
Yeah. So I worked with flavor chemists and people in sensory science, and we had a question bank of hundreds of possible flavors, and they're acting as analogs to the chemistry of, say, the wine. So what's happening is when you're answering those questions, we're plotting your unique palette in a multi-dimensional space along with the chemistry. And what the purpose of the machine learning algorithms is to identify vectors in that multi-dimensional space. So a vector can be a compound or a combination of compounds. So what it's not doing is filtering by tasting notes. It's actually looking at how you're answering all those flavor questions in combination with each other, and then understanding how that relates to the flavor matrix. So yeah, it is a little complicated, and I can't exactly tell you all the relationships other than the chemistry of a product and whether or not you like it is not a one-to-one relationship. And that's the purpose of the machine learning algorithms, is to figure that out. If I could comprehend, like if my puny human brain could comprehend how the chemistry exactly relates to you liking or disliking certain flavors, I wouldn't need AI or machine learning to do that. But that's at a high level how it works. And the benefit is it's so granular. Because the chemistry is so robust that your palette is almost like a fingerprint, we found. So we've identified a minimum of 119,000 customer palettes to date that are unique. And the largest co-occurrence of people who have the same palette using our method is 13 people.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, that's really cool. How do you see like that? And I know you're not as much on the computer science AI side, but that technology, evolving. I'll be honest, Netflix and Spotify still don't necessarily always give me the right, movies or songs that I'm looking for as recommendations. So how do you see that technology growing and impacting compared to where it is now?
So I hope I'm answering your question, but on the Netflix piece, we didn't go that route because we feel like what we're doing is more accurate. Our algorithms, our information-based algorithms, are more accurate than collaborative filtering algorithms. So that's what the Amazon and Netflixes of the world do. And I would say generally it works quite well for things like toaster ovens or whatever it is you buy on Amazon. But when it comes to something like wine, the latent variables in the data play a huge impact. So I can't just look at someone who's very similar to me and, has the same income and lives in the same zip code and has the same demographics and say, oh, this person buys, I don't know, Range Rovers and Radiohead albums, therefore I'm going to recommend this appliance to them. Because I can go out to dinner with that person and we can share oaky, buttery Chardonnay and she could love it and I would absolutely hate it. And there's nothing in the data that could predict that. So I think the future in general, maybe even in AI, is going to be for multidisciplinary companies where they're gathering more robust data sets that will give you the ability to provide more accurate recommendations, more granular recommendations. Then the more products we get out into the world and the more options we have, I think the more important that's going to be.
Yeah, that was a great answer. I think I'm interested next in the entrepreneurial journey. I just was talking with someone. The first business book I read was E-Myth. And it was all about this concept that, you're a bread baker and you love baking bread. But then when you start a business, you're doing HR and sales and all of this other stuff. So for you, that obviously came from this scientific background and a passion and interest in the industry, what's been your entrepreneurial journey? And are you still involved in that? Or is your role and the way you work completely different now?
Oh, completely different. My role has changed. I've had several iterations for my role. So I started off as a chemist, but I only have a bachelor's degree, right? So maybe in the beginning that worked to my advantage because I didn't come in trying to invent something with preconceived notions and I wasn't told what I can't do yet, right? So that was good. But as things progressed, I needed more expertise. So I hired way more qualified and experienced chemists than myself to take over. And then they needed, PhDs in computer science or AI. So we needed those experts. And as the team grew, I kept switching into roles where we needed help in the company. This is like really early stage. So for a long time, I was thinking, how is what I'm currently doing going to be a job for someone else someday? And eventually, I really streamlined my role to, I guess, be the person who's getting all these brilliant minds, much more brilliant than myself, to collaborate on the same vision in the same room. So yeah, very different role than what I started with.
Katarina, what does the team look like now?
Yeah, we're a team of 28 and we're quite tech heavy right now. So we have a few salespeople and customer success people to deal with our growing client base. But other than that, we're chemists and engineers and data scientists.
Now, for a group like that, how much have you taken into consideration, like culture and building the team and creating a great environment? What do you do from that perspective?
I think culture is extremely important for a company, any company, let alone a company at this stage. So I would say we take company culture very seriously. The best way to have good company culture to begin with, I think, is to hire people who would fit in your company. That doesn't mean that there isn't diversity. We have a very diverse team of people, but we all work well together. But the one thing I think we have in common that we place a lot of importance on is being a self-starter. So we're very fortunate to have people who are already motivated and believe in the vision. And I think the way we foster that is in part is by culture, but it's also the mission. I'll give you an example. And I don't think you can attract the most brilliant minds to work with you with, I don't know, free food or cool gadgets in the office or anything like that. That's definitely not what we do. We don't bribe genius in that way. I think the people we have are standing behind what we're doing and they feel like they're making an impact and they're making a difference in the company. They have a huge role to play, if that kind of makes sense. So I think people are motivated by that, by having that impact. So I hope I answered your question. We're also very resilient, I think, in our culture. So we're communicating our wins and losses on a regular basis, and we've kind of built up that resilience as a team. We think that's really important because, well, I personally believe being in a startup is like being in the Navy SEALs, at least psychologically, and you usually fail by quitting. And the way you don't fail is by iterating through whatever isn't working. And I think that's a huge part of our culture. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
No, I think there's so much to unpack there. I think I'm first curious, how do you develop that why and that vision, and how do you communicate it that people get excited? Because I agree with you. It's not about the snacks. It's about like why you're there and what you can contribute to the world in a lot of cases. But how did you, make that tangible and communicate it to the team to get them excited?
So we make it a point to communicate frequently, but efficiently, I would say. So the more you're in touch with each other, the more you get these big visions and ideas across. We set time aside to get together and make sure we're in alignment. That's a basic one, but I hate to almost say this, but like I personally feel like the real key to having a good company culture is just to start out with great people in the first place. Everything else just kind of falls into place if you have self-motivated people who already believe in what you're doing. Like if you have that, maintaining the cultures, I would say relatively easy. We'll see what happens as the company scales if we can keep that going. It's working really well for us now. I'll give you an example on how I know this person is right for the job, if that kind of makes sense. So we had a data science intern who worked for us for a year when he was finishing his degree, and when he graduated, he was getting ridiculous offers from all the top tech companies. Like there was no way I could match that offer or even come close to like half of it. And he approached us and asked us for a job offer, and I told him, I'll try. Well, I'll see what I can do. So he showed me his offers, and I came back with something that was like 40%. That was my best offer, 40% of his lowest offer. And he came back and he said, great, I accept. And I said, great, we'll get you set up. And then he came back and said, okay, how much of my salary can I trade in for more equity in the company? And I was like, that's the guy I want to be part of the team. So when you find someone like that, you really want to get them in your team, because they're going to be in it for the long haul.
That's a really cool story. I love that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tony.
I was just going to ask, along the hiring process, when you're talking to talent, what are some of the other things? Like, that's a fantastic example. What are some other ways, some of the cues that you get that you just, people either get your vision and buy into it or they don't? Mm-hmm. I would love to hear just a little bit of that.
So there's one thing I do when I'm interviewing someone. I try to convince them not to join the company. So this definitely worked in the earlier stages. Now I think as we're growing, we might change our strategy. But I would tell people, look, are you sure you want to do this? You're going to be working crazy hours. The pay isn't that great right now, but you get equity. There's not going to be a lot of direction. Like, there are a lot of things we're all figuring out right now. Are you okay with that lack of structure? Like, are you sure you really want to do this? And I so far it's worked, because we have really, really good retention, and the people who hear that and lean in, first of all, they know what they're dealing with. And second of all, I think they're not surprised and they're prepared to deal with it. So that's one way we filter out, you can say, true startup people.
You brought up the resilience thing, and there's always wins and losses, right? And mm-hmm. But I think one of the challenges is for other founders, they hear about the wins more often. I don't know if you mind sharing a story of like resilience, or what are some of the challenges that you ran into over this period of time, because I think that's where people learn the most.
Yeah. Well, so when I first started this endeavor, I didn't, the original, I wouldn't say founders, but people involved, it was just like a extension of like a school activity or project. And we were all, just getting together, trying to figure out what to do with this. I didn't realize how much you really have to filter for people who understand that you need to stick around for the long haul, and really invest. Sure, you can be part of a fun project for 6 months, but what happens when you graduate and your parents want you to get a real job, or You know what I mean? Or when you realize you're going to be working 14-hour days for the next couple of years with very little pay, and what's the opportunity cost of that, right? Essentially, the original people who were part of this, I don't know what this project is phase, didn't stick around. And one of them was helping us in develop the analytical chemistry methodology that I started with further. And one day he just up and left and said, "I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of pressure. I have to go, get a real job." So that was very difficult because we hadn't, created standard operating procedures or documented every step of the process yet. So I had to go back. I hired more qualified people, and that really helped. But I had to go back and backtrack and figure out how to pick up where we left off. And that was a really challenging time, but we came out with it with something better than we had originally. So there's that. I would say that one of the hardest things a founder can do is pick the right founders.
Yeah, that's pretty great. So I almost want to ask about the future and what you see for the company to potentially work backwards, but what do you see happening for the business in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, so if you can give me a few minutes. So what has happened, and this will go into what is happening, is since we launched the recommender, we started generating this heat map across the US and now in Europe on consumer palettes, right? So imagine like the Verizon coverage map, but we can look at any product and we can see what percentage of the population on a store, local, or regional level this product matches to. So as we evolved, we started to take that data and provide it to retailers who started to use it to optimize their assortment and reduce waste on the shelves. And then toward the end of last year, we started to officially vertically integrate and work directly with manufacturers. It was opportune because COVID happened and e-com exploded, and for many brands this was the first time they were trying to figure out a new way of making money. So we took that same heat map we had generated from providing recommendations and started to use it for identifying market of opportunity predictively across the US. Like, we know your brand is going to succeed in this particular market, and you might be trying to sell it in Boston, but hey, in South Beach, Florida, you have 5x the customer base and your competitors are not very present there. And these are the type of people who would buy your product again. And then it just started to escalate into, wow, we can test the chemistry of a product and predict with 93% accuracy how consumers will score it out of 5 stars. Why don't we do computational blending and help the manufacturers formulate products so that they actually succeed in the market and they're saving millions of dollars of investment or risk doing that. And so at the end of this, where we are today is we're working with the top 6 manufacturers in the US, 2 out of the 10 largest in the world, and we'll be moving into Europe late Q4 of this year. And now that we're vertically integrated and we're helping people connect to their customers, mitigate waste on the shelf, and mitigate the risk of launching a failed product, those are the 3 things we do. We're starting to see that we're generating this flywheel effect with the data, where the more retailers we're working with, the more valuable we are to manufacturers, the more valuable we are to retailers. And we're in a sense starting to connect the two in the supply chain in a way that has never been done before. So I think the next step is to move into Europe, because we've proven efficacy there, and further reinforce that we're a vertically integrated SaaS company, and that's what's providing this visibility and insight that's never been provided before.
I would be curious to hear, Katarina, if you see any other businesses out there that are maybe in other verticals, industries, they're doing similar things to what you're doing in taking, these large data sets and understanding them to model human preferences and behaviors that, you know, you might be paying attention to others out there, but obviously AI brings and machine learning bring these fascinating new things to the table. And I'd be curious to hear if there's others out there that you're aware of and what that stuff looks like.
Yeah, in a way. So there are companies in the world of sensory science, but every time I come across one, I think, it's kind of similar, but it's not quite like this. And usually the conclusion is it's a partnership and not really competitive for us. And the reason is because there are companies out there that are looking at how do you formulate new products, for example, and they're using neural nets to come up with new recipes. But what our technology is really doing is just telling you if people will actually like that recipe. So there's a synergy there, right? So I don't know if you've seen the AI weirdness blog or anything like that, but it shows computer generated recipes, for example. So sometimes it will come up with funny things like get 30 pounds of cabbage in a mint leaf and stir until it boils. And like, that's funny, but what I'm saying is Tastery can actually tell you, is this a good recipe or not? Also, I haven't, any company that's in the recommendation space, I feel like is different because they're selling wine. We're not in the business of selling wine. So I know it's a long-winded answer, but on the tech side, we're trying to solve the same problem, but it's not quite the same thing. It's more of a partnership. And then on the business side, I have yet to see someone with a multidisciplinary business model like this. I wish I could say, yes, we have these competitors and this is how we're different and this is how we're faster, better, and cheaper. But I think it's just early in the market.
Yeah, and not even necessarily competitors. I'm saying like doing totally different things out there, but looking at similar things, understanding massive data sets that helping to understand just human behavior and preferences. So,
sort of. Sort of. So there is a quality control software for beer. I believe the company rebranded to Analytical Flavor Systems. And what they do is they identify 24 characteristics in a beer. Don't quote me on this, but like how hoppy or sweet is it? And they have expert tasters rate on a spider chart how certain beers have those characteristics. And then they use AI to look at a new beer and predict if that beer is going to have those characteristics. I think quality control has a really important role to play in product formulation. But again, I would say we're in the business of telling you how many customers and where are they and how much are they going to like that beer, not what flavors they're going to perceive. That's really the main difference. And the similarity is, you know, we're working on product development and connecting products to consumers that will love them the most.
That's cool.
How do you actually engage with customers? Is it truly like a software as a service where they sign in and can self-serve? Or I'm just kind of curious versus, you know, how much do you have to get in with clients and you know, go through scientific process and consult and help them through that?
Yeah, great question. We have, so when we're selling the API or recommender, we have channel partners, so IT service providers and companies like UST Global who are already working with any major big box you can think of. So they take the Tastery API and they go out and they help us implement it, and we talk to very major customers. So we don't really, we're leveraging very large sales teams with very little investment. So that's been a benefit for us. On the manufacturing side, we do have our own in-house team. And the funny thing is we were iterating through the product and they started coming to us. So We engage with directly with the winemaking team, and in some cases the business and marketing team, depending on what aspect of the software they're interested in. So with the winemaking team, they approach us because they want to do AI-assisted product formulation and make a better quality wine or a more consistent wine or whatever it may be. And then the marketing or business team want to use this heat map data that we've generated to understand where's their market, where is their product going to succeed in the market, things like that.
I'd love to know how you figured out that on-ramp of working with other companies, because there's other founders out there that have a technology and they're trying to figure out, like, okay, how do I get it out to the market? You know, was that the initial idea, is that we would leverage these other companies as a vehicle? Or did that come to life in some other way?
For us, it made immediate sense when we came across the opportunity, and we just leaned into it. So we were discovered at the grocery shop trade show by this multi-billion-dollar company called UST Global, and this guy comes up to me and says, "We're looking for innovative startups, and we're really excited about what we're doing. We think we can bring you a lot of customers in the retail space. Let's talk." And then we talked, and one thing led to another, and it kept making sense every step of the way to lean into this partnership. And shortly after that, we partnered with another channel partner called iControl, who provides inventory management services to retail, which opens us up to another client base. And they're excited because they get to show their clients a new innovative product and to show that they're on the cutting edge of technology, and Tastery is a part of that. It just made sense every step of the way. Yeah.
No, and that's great. I mean, I think that helps for other founders that are out there, is that, you know, they call people lucky, but that's a little bit of preparation and opportunity, right? And so it sounds like that's how it happened, and so I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I would say being open-minded about opportunities that come across, come your way, that served me well, is listening to people who have ideas and thinking through them. UST was one of those positive experiences.
So how did COVID and everything that's happened, you touched on it for a second, and people moving to e-commerce. I'm both interested in how it impacted the business and your strategy, and then also your team and culture.
Yeah, thank you. So right before COVID hit, our strategy was to continually grow our presence in retail. So we had, produced some very impressive metrics on how we increase sales and make customers happier, and our rollouts and deployments, where we provide Tastery recommendations, whether it be website, app, or on iPads in stores. There were many mediums. All those engagements continue to expand, and we were projecting this exponential growth curve as we were negotiating contracts with our clients. But when COVID hit, they started to really focus on, keeping their customers safe and keeping essentials on the shelf. So safe to say that exponential growth curve in retail did not happen. We renewed our existing contracts, which was good, and the conversations have come back with a vengeance since then. But we essentially had about a 9-month lull in 2020 with making progress in retail. I think every vendor did. So what we decided to do around Q1 of 2020 was take our 2021 strategy and just execute on it 9 months ahead of schedule. And our 2021 strategy was to take all the data and insight and software we created and just repurpose it and sell it directly to wineries. Because it's an opportune time for wine brands to be getting into e-com, and this heat map is it's predictive. Like that's the major selling point, is we can see what's going to happen before it happens. And when you're getting into a new type of business model, you can say for the first time, that's a really useful tool. So we just quickly pivoted to or accelerated, pivot isn't the right word, to vertically integrate, and it worked to our advantage. We hardly did any sales or marketing. I think we put out a couple press releases, and we onboarded 200 clients quite organically. So going into 2021, we already had presence on both sides of the supply chain. So I feel like I'm seeing 2021 is it's growing, it's accelerating faster than I had anticipated because of that.
What about on that internal side with the team? And we just had a founder on not that long ago that talked about, they lost a number of potential contracts as COVID came in. They had to lay off some people, and how they were able to rally around that internally with the folks that they did keep. So internally, how did you manage through changes? And was there any change in I guess culture and buy-in from the team?
I think there. So the buy-in in the team, I think it's strengthened because we were fortunate to have seen a very direct impact on our efforts to switch gears. Like that came very quickly for us. Wineries were very interested in the product off the bat, and retail moves relatively slower. The sales cycle is much longer, so it was a surprise. So I think that definitely bolstered morale to see a direct impact on our immediate efforts. I think we weren't prepared for increase in traction on both sides of the supply chain, and the infrastructure of the company just didn't have a chance to catch up to that. So right now we're working, double overtime to continue accelerate product development so that we can deliver more services to customers who are demanding them, and that's both an exciting and stressful time because we have very major clients who are in some cases using version 1.0 of our software. So we're excited to have that customer, but we also really don't want to screw it up, right? So stressful and exciting.
Katarina, I know we talked a little bit about, what you see 3 to 5 years out, but what do you have on the horizon here next 6 to 12 months? What's some of the exciting things you guys have going on?
Yeah, sure. We will be opening up a lab in Europe, and we will have tested over 3,000 SKUs by Q1 2022. And we are now expanding our efforts to also be in retail in Europe, and our channel partners have a presence there. So we're collaborating on that. So yeah, we're moving outside of the US. That's the major next plan.
Yeah, it's really cool. So, what do you think over the years has been one of the greatest catalysts for growth? I think, again, for our audience of founders, is there anything that really helped drive growth, whether that was a certain hire or partnership, like you mentioned? Was there one thing that stood out as a major catalyst for the growth of the company?
That's a great question. One thing, I have to think of one thing.
And if it's not one thing, I think that's a good lesson in some ways for some of the folks that watch our show, that it isn't one thing. I am always interested if there is some turning point or some thing that helped click in place to make a huge difference. But if it's not one thing, I think that's a great point too.
Yeah, I would say that, I feel like so fortunate that in Q1 of 2020, we as a team made a very quick decision that we're going to take this 9-month lull in retail and we're going to turn it into a product development sprint, and we're going to get our roadmap out, execute on a roadmap ahead of time. That was a major moment for us, because since we've done that, we've proven out the business model. We've proven out that we can be a vertically integrated company, and that this is multiplying the value for everyone involved, everyone that we're working with. Huge. I mean, because before that, we were talking about this idea of this data flywheel for years, but because we made it happen, we can actually see it now, and we can see it working. I guess that's the best I can do. That was pretty major for us.
Well, I think that's good. I mean, it's the idea that you're faced with an external influence, which happens to businesses all the time, and then the ability to pivot on that and use it as a strength to kind of catapult, the business forward in a direction that was beneficial. So I think that's a great idea for folks that are out there, is that you're going to get hit with external factors you can't control, and you do have to pivot. And if you can do it in the right way, it can be, not a negative as much as a positive.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's great. So I one of the questions that I always ask folks, and this kind of plays into what we just talked about, but if you were able to go back before the business started, let's say back to your research days, and sit and have coffee with yourself, what's one piece of advice that you would give, 5 or 10 years ago?
Oh my goodness. I would just say be prepared to sacrifice and stick with it. It's so hard to know sometimes how far along you are in the process. I don't know if that kind of makes sense. Like when you're 90% there to achieving a particular goal or milestone, it doesn't feel like that. Even when you're really, really close, sometimes you don't know until you get there. And I've just seen over the years so many brilliant startups give up just too soon, just too soon, just because you go in, you start a company, and you have this idea that you're going to be at a certain point in a matter of years. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Sometimes you have to iterate, especially if you have a new technology that's never been developed before and hasn't been proven before. And, it's a white space company, for example. So I would just say iterate until something works, but don't give up. I think, a lot of people, I think, take the fail fast idea the wrong way. Like, I'm not saying keep banging your head against the wall if something's not working, but don't give up too soon either.
Yeah, we've heard that phrase "fail fast" a lot, and I tend to like it, but you're right, is that it's about iteration and not necessarily stopping and reinventing, if you will. So that's great. You mentioned the word sacrifice, and something that came to my mind when you said that was, we always talk with people about work-life balance. Mm-hmm. So for you as an entrepreneur, how have you found for yourself, not just, and work-life balance to me is always weird, because if you're passionate about it, like it's just part of your life, but maybe how do you handle the mentality of building a business that can be stressful? There's ups and downs, there is a lot of hours. How do you handle the mental side to keep yourself, engaged and focused and driven?
Yeah. I'm still figuring that out. It's difficult. It's hard to turn that off switch or off switch off, right? I realize though that if you don't do that, you will be less productive, and you will not make the best decisions if you don't have a clear head, if you haven't had a chance to relax and rejuvenate. So I personally, I love to, before COVID, go to the sauna. I love to exercise. I have to exercise every other day to stay, positive, you can say. And I used to feel guilty about that, but I schedule it. I block off in my schedule this like rejuvenation time, and I just consider it an investment in my productivity, and that makes me feel a lot better about it.
Yeah, it's great.
So, Katarina, before we wrap up here with the last question, for our viewers, where can they follow and see what both you and Tastery are up to?
Yeah, you can. Well, we're present on our website, not so much social media yet. So I would say if you would like to reach out, I get forwarded emails from hello@tastery.com, and I'll likely reply. The second best option is LinkedIn. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn.
Very good.
So with tech founders, one of the things I always want to hear about, you're on the bleeding edge of new ideas and just, tend to be very innovative. What do you think across all the technologies that are out there and that are emerging, what do you think is going to be most impactful for us as a society over the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh my goodness, that is a great question. I'm really excited about what's happening in the biotech/bioinformatics space. I think, people talk about the law of accelerating returns, but you really, really see it there. I think there's going to be a huge impact on medical and health. And I don't know if you've recently seen any info out there, like by David Sinclair and his new study on rejuvenating the eye cells of mice, and setting back the biological clock with gene therapy. I mean, that would have been unheard of 10 years ago. So I hope I answered your question, but a lot of progress being made there.
So you're telling me we're all going to live forever?
I think there's that's not what I think. That's what Sinclair thinks, but I think there's a 50% chance. I really do believe it.
Pretty interesting stuff. Yeah, and then you add in artificial intelligence and all these other things, and it's kind of interesting where things will go.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Well, thank you. That was awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, this has been fantastic, Katarina. Thank you for your time here today. Thanks for everyone who tuned in. We will see you again next time. And everybody take care. Thank you, Katarina.
Thank you. Have a good week.
You too.